Former bank robber here. AMA. Is there a bond between bank robbers in prison? Like, do you guys swap stories and become friendly because you're in for the same thing? Oddly, yes. I imagine it's no different than people who've played the same sport or can play the same musical instrument. Are there any strange weird moments that stood out to you during your robberies? Like, things you remember but aren't sure why. Maybe the exact outfit a customer was wearing or something. While waiting in line during the first robbery I did, there was a girl standing in front of me. She had a great butt. Somewhere out there is a girl who doesn't know that a bank robber complimented her butt. With better social skills, I might have introduced myself to her and skipped the whole robbery altogether even. At what point did you have the thought, I might have ducked up? I've never quite fully felt that way, frankly. What was the closest call for you, where you actually got away with whatever you were doing? Probably the last one. The lady teller kinda freaked out and started screaming to lock the doors. It was a tad stressful to say the least, but I managed to just turn around and walk out as though nothing were happening. They did lock the doors, but it was just after I'd walked out. I don't think the intent was to trap me there, so it's not like I barely got away in that sense. But it was still way too close for comfort. That was the end of it for me. How did the other prisoners treat you when they heard you are a bank robber? There's a weird level of respect that the guys inside have for bank robbers. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. They're fascinated with it just like anyone else. Crazy story. What was going on in your head when you were robbing banks? Was it a huge adrenaline rush? Were you scared? Nervous? I would like to know what goes on when you commit a crime like that. Thanks. It felt a bit like riding a roller coaster. There's a sense of danger, but ultimately, it was safe enough to check out. It's obviously riskier than riding a roller coaster, but that's the best analogy I can make. It was crazy, and it was scary. But to some, that's what makes life fun. How difficult is it really to rob a bank and get away with it? Who organizes the whole operation? Not very. The only person involved, if they're smart. If I drove say 800 miles away from where I lived a city 2 states away, and I only robbed one bank, what are the odds I would get caught? I'd rather deal in percentages than odds. Ratios have always bothered me a bit. Officially, I'd estimate a 60% failure rate for the scenario you've described. Don't do it. E1. I like your username. E2. Check the comment chain below for the exact reason I avoid odds. In actuality, I know WTF I'm talking, whether it be odds, fractions, or percentages. I was just making a joke. Being rejected by Amazon after being recruited by Amazon. I get the feeling you want to talk about this. What happened with Amazon? I'm betting he applied, got through the interview process, went for the background check, and the hiring process ended there. But that's just a swag. Pretty much. Got through to orientation and all that stuff. They called a few days before my first day and basically said never mind. The most annoying part was that I spoke openly at every step, from the recruiter to the person who interviewed me and then the person who led orientation, about my criminal history and asked if I was wasting my time. Amazon will still sell my book. I just can't work at the place that ships it to you. So now that you've been out of incarceration, what are you doing for a job and finding a way to make ends meet? Does being a former convict and listed as a bank robber deter you from certain jobs and all that as well? I worked the first job I could get after first getting out. I worked there, production related work, for just over a year before getting a job in the oil and gas industry. I worked there for a few years and then got out because of an injury. There are definitely certain jobs I can't do these days because of my past. For example, bank teller is probably out of the question. The law doesn't provide for discriminating against ex-cons, but most corporations still do exactly that. For the records, I support a company's right to not hire someone based on their past. I actually wish the laws were a little different there because there's just a shit ton of wasted time going into looking for a job because you think things are fair when they're really not. I'd much rather a company be able to proudly boast, hey keep your former criminal as away from us, because I would do exactly that and look for the former felony friendly companies instead. Do you think the sentence fitted the crime? No. I think I got less time than I deserved. I'm forever grateful that the judge had something better in mind for me. I've never spoken with him or heard his point of view in detail, but I definitely don't think I got what I deserved. In hindsight, it worked out for the better. Maybe I'm wrong about how many years I deserved or whatever, but I still feel like I got a shit ton of mercy and all of that. I'm not fully read up on your story, but was your history of crime gradual in smaller offenses, or did you go directly to the bank robbery? What could those around have done to prevent this path? The worst crime I'd ever committed prior to the bank stuff was probably stealing candy from a store as a child. There was an incident in my mid-20s where I filed a fraudulent police report saying that someone had stolen my identity, but I don't know how illegal it was since I was pretty vague about the whole thing. Good question. I wish I had something more interesting to say about it. What was your favorite bank to rob? Chase. Why? That's not as easy of a question to answer. It's probably just a familiarity thing. I also prefer Chevy to Ford, but that's only because my dad drove Chevy trucks most of my childhood. I was really confused when he got a Ford later in life. I don't really know what to think now. My gut says Chevy, but my brain says it doesn't matter. If anything, Ford should probably be my preference. But who knows? Chase it is. What's something you'd like to share with us that hasn't previously been asked or prompted? Looking for some tidbit of information that you'd really love to share but haven't had the opening for. Marriage is weird. I hate that religion and the law have somehow managed to come together on that one. If you love someone, be with them. If you don't want to be with them anymore, then don't. I don't understand how we got to the point that marriage is such a major thing. Is life possible after prison? Outside of just starting your own business, is there anywhere that is willing to take in a felon at a reasonable pay? What's the best practice for dodging cops and staying low? There are lots of blue-collar jobs worth taking. Learning a trade is your best bet though, I think. The best practice for dodging cops is to not try and dodge cops. They're there, and they're not going anywhere. Just keep your nose clean and wear your seatbelt. Hello Clay. I've got a few questions for you. How difficult is it to get contraband in prison? How do you get it in? Did the prison system succeed in helping you change your ways? And finally, is it true that Baskin-Robbins always finds out? Wish you all the best with your days ahead. As long as there are prison guards, it will be easy to get contraband into prison. They've got the market on that sheet. The prison system is trash. It doesn't work. First rule of Baskin-Robbins is, never mind. Wrong joke. Thanks. How did you stay in the 9th grade for 3 years? I didn't do the work, so I didn't earn the credit. For all of my life prior to that, the school always passed me because they knew I was smart enough for the next grade, even though I never did any work to prove it. But in high school, you actually have to earn it, which I didn't. Have you ever considered doing a podcast? Especially since your book says you have a lifelong best friend that grew up to be a cop. I can just see the storyline of an ex-bank robber and an ex-cop, neither of who see eye to eye with societal norms of what they are expected to be like, being something that people couldn't turn off. Especially if both you guys are funny. Something to think about. I mean, I'd subscribe. Yes. And that friend wants to D. Lol, I just realized who that was. You ducking idiot. Now I want to listen to it. Has the podcast got a name yet? No, that's my best friend. He's been wanting to do a podcast for a while now. Over the course of your entire career, how much did you make? Not very much. Probably like 5 figures. Aside from your freedom and robbing banks, what's the one thing you missed the most about the outside while you were in the clink? Hugs. Why did you opt for bank robbery over just a bunch of smaller, easier robberies? To me, the bank robberies were smaller, easier robberies. What is the craziest thing about prison life that you haven't seen depicted in movies TV? There's really nobody to talk to when you have a bad day or get bad news. In prison, everyone is having the worst day of their life. Nobody gives a shit about yours. Are the prisons really divided into racial groups? Were you coerced into aligning with a certain group? Yes. And yes. I'm white, so I mostly lived with whites. But the thing is, racial segregation in prison isn't even a bad thing. Nobody gets butthurt about it. It's just how it is. I could play chess with non-whites or go watch Bet in the Black TV room or whatever else. It wasn't a literal don't associate with people who aren't your kind of thing. It was more of a be with what you are kind of thing. Hope that makes sense. What was prison actually like? Is that where you got your tattoos? Nah, I got all my tattoos before prison. How did the romantic relationships go? Do you think it was hard to get to know new people if you go with your open face telling the truth from the beginning? Or in the opposite, you think that kind of bad guy is something women like about you? I'm unlikable for reasons far above the criminal history. Lol. Can you tell me how easy it is to rob banks, and why you failed miserably and got caught? In detail. I don't want to make the same mistakes. Yes, I can. No, I won't. I'm not here to mentor future knuckleheads. I didn't fail miserably or get caught. I did my thing and then turned myself in months after I was finished. As for you, you've already made the biggest mistake of all, that is, posting publicly about it and talking to others. Hello. Is it true that the worst thing in prison is the Dementors? No. The worst thing in prison is the lack of hugs. You forget how important those tiny little things we take for granted really are. Prison taught me a lot of things, but above everything else, it taught me the value of a hug. Were you ever remorseful in the moment for the bank employees? I couldn't care less about stealing from a big banking company. Morally, I wouldn't have an issue. I would, however, be very remorseful about potentially hurting someone just trying to make a paycheck, physically or emotionally. I never really felt much towards the tellers on a personal level. There was one moment in one of them where I felt bad about the teller, but I wouldn't quite describe it as remorse. It was more along the lines of, man, this sucks. For the most part, I just saw the people working at the bank as part of the company, not individuals. What is your favorite bank robbery movie? What is the most accurate bank robbery movie? What did it get right? What is the least accurate bank robbery movie? What did it get wrong? I hope you like to watch bank robbery movies. Point Break, Office Space. How terrifyingly simple it is to exploit minor things for major gains. The Ocean's franchise. How attractive everyone is and how well they get along. I don't. I like documentaries and comedies. How did your wife, family, friends react to you turning yourself in? I don't know. I was in jail. I'm very curious, how long did you end up being in jail? How different did the world feel after you came out? Like new technology and other things that were common to friend and family but not to you. Or were you able to keep up with news and stuff? Thanks. 3 years, 3 months, and 10 days. It was overwhelming how different things were, especially because I was always ahead of the game with technology. Remind me later, and I will share a story about this from my book when I have a chance to look it up. Edit. Finally getting around to sharing the story. It's a copy-paste directly from my book, so it's a bit wordier than a standard comment. Here you go. The 31st of August, 2010, just a few minutes before being released from prison, I was given a $50 check and a voucher for a bus ride to anywhere in Texas. The rest was up to me. The day I got out of prison was beautiful. The August heat in Texas is usually pretty unbearable for most, but I didn't even feel it. The sky was clear, and the birds were happy to see me. I knew so because they were singing a song just for me. I walked across the street and cashed my $50 check with my prison ID and bought my favorite soft drink, Tahitian treat, and a pack of bubble gum. Man, I really missed bubble gum. The person picking me up was from the entrepreneurship program I'd graduated from on the inside. His name was Pat, and I'd never met him before. All I knew was that he was a really big dude driving a little tiny Scion, so I didn't think I'd have a problem finding him. There was a park just across the street from the front door of the prison, and they had picnic benches and a pavilion and plenty of other places for people to sit and wait for their loved ones who were soon to be released from prison. I didn't have anyone there just yet, so I decided to sit at one of the picnic benches and enjoy my Tahitian treat and bubble gum in solitude until I saw Pat. After a few minutes, a lady old enough to be my grandmother came over and sat across from me. The prison gave me regular clothes, and this old lady didn't realize that she was sitting across from a violent offender, as my paperwork had described me. I felt a little bad for how naive she was for sitting next to me. I wasn't going to do anything to hurt her, of course, but I thought she'd be scared out of her mind if she knew who I was or what I'd done. I hadn't been out of prison a full hour, but I was already within arm's reach of a normal person. She was perpendicular to me. She was sitting sideways facing the prison and using the table as an armrest. I was facing the side of her head. It was weird. But it got even weirder when she spoke to me. Without really looking at me, she asked, "Get out today." Excuse me, I heard her words clearly, but I was sure I'd misunderstood her question. She chuckled and looked over at me, enunciating clearly to prove a point. I said, "Did you get out today?" I smiled and replied, "It's that obvious." She hadn't offended me. She was a sweet old woman who just wanted to make me feel comfortable in a world where I obviously hadn't existed for quite a while, but it made me a little anxious that she could so easily tell that I'd just gotten out of prison. Thankfully, she obliged and answered the very question I was wondering. She held up her iPhone and said, "You're not playing on your phone. The only people who sit here without a phone are people who just got out." She made a good point, and the humor was not lost on me. I was impressed by her observation, but I was mostly just happy to be having a conversation with someone who wasn't an inmate or a guard. It was nice, and I savored every second of it. It was also quite reminiscent of the old man who had sat next to me on the bus back to Texas the day I had turned myself in. She turned back to face the prison and went on to tell me that she was picking up her son. Again. This was his third time to prison, so she knew the routine pretty well by now. Without looking at me, she offered a quick piece of advice that was both unsolicited and completely welcome. "Now you stay away from this place, young man. This ain't the way to be." "Yes, Mom," I agreed and smiled along with her. She was mostly just making friendly chit-chat, and I enjoyed it. After a few minutes of this, the conversation trailed off and we were left sitting there, her facing the prison and me facing the nutritional facts on my Tahitian treat bottle. I'd never realized how much sugar was in those things. Then again, it probably wouldn't have mattered. Besides, my bubble gum was sugar-free, so it probably all evened out anyway. The old lady caught me daydreaming and interrupted by saying, "Would you like to call somebody?" The thought had never crossed my mind a few minutes earlier when she'd mentioned me not having a phone and showing me hers. I wasn't worried about Pat. I knew he'd get there soon enough, and if I only had the chance to make one phone call, I'd preferred to call my mother anyway. "Yes, please. I live in Dallas though." "Is that going to be long distance?" "Oh, honey, you've been gone a while, huh?" Long distance is free on these things, and with a friendly cackle, she took out her phone again and asked, "Who do you wanna call?" "My mother, if that's okay." She handed me her iPhone and said, "Sure thing. Go right ahead." The iPhone came out in July of 2007, but I was arrested in May of 2007. I had only seen them on TV and in magazines. I'd never held one, and I definitely didn't know how to operate them. Before I had gone to jail, phones still had buttons. But this thing was little more than a rectangular piece of glass. Almost immediately, she realized her mistake and held out her hand to take the phone back. "Here, I'll dial it for you." What's her number? For the first time in well over 3 years, I was able to talk to my mother without being preempted every 5 minutes by a recording reminding both of us that this call has been placed from a correctional institution. When my mom answered the phone, I was all smiles. "Hey, Mom." "Hey, son, just another reminder that I was free."